got the number.
What's up, everyone? Riot Hart here with Kentucky Attorney Dave Johnson. We are going to discuss Senate Bill 211. I just noticed I got a spelling error there, but we'll correct that. So, yeah, Dave, just give us a little bit about what's going on with SB 211.
Well, SB 211 is a Kentucky Senate bill. That means it started in the Senate. It made it out of the committee today. It probably passed the Senate. Don't know if it'll pass the House, but it's real important that everybody express their opinion, because what SB 211 proposes is that if we taunt or insult or challenge a police officer expressly, says police officer, and this is important, to the point that that it provokes a violent response, it's a crime. And so when we talk about words, and it says gestures as well, so when we talk about words and gestures and police, we are expressly talking about the First Amendment, because the First Amendment does not, purports to not allow the government to regulate speech. Now, that doesn't count for all speech, right? But anywho, right here, SB 11 particularly points at police officers and says you cannot insult them, you cannot taunt them with words or gestures, to the point that it would provoke a reasonable person, which is also important, because usually under the Fourth Amendment, we don't talk about reasonable persons. We talk about reasonable police officers who are held to a higher standard of care in regards to protecting those rights under the Constitution for the public. So we've got a little problem here. We basically got a legislator in Frankfurt, again, clearly looking at everything they've done lately. They're obviously trying to attack Louisville and the BLM movement, Beyond protesters, anything you want. You know what I'm talking about. And so we have this statute proposed that if you use words or gestures and insult or taunt a police officer, and there's a few other words in there too, to the point that a reasonable person, which is generally what we call the jury, finds that it would provoke a violent response, you can be arrested for a crime. However, it's not so clear that this would pass the federal courts because of the First Amendment. So let's just say for a second, Jared, that you're riding in your car and you were speeding a little bit, you got stopped, and the police officer stopped you and he gave you a ticket for a non-moving violation because he was feeling friendly, but you still didn't like it. And you drove off and you gave him the finger after he gave you the ticket. And then you flipped him the bird out the window, right? Thanks for the ticket. And he pulls you over again. And he decides he's going to increase that ticket, obviously because you gave him the finger out the window, right? Now he's mad. Now, we could say for most people, flipping them the bird is definitely taunting them or insulting them in some way, right? Well, now police officers pulled you over. And remember, too, this isn't specific legal advice for anyone in particular. This is just us having civil discourse on the law. If you need an attorney, get in the phone book and find you an attorney to talk to specifically, because that's not what I'm here for. I'm just here to talk. Education. And politics. Back to the story. So he decides to take the ticket he gave you before and increase the violation up to speeding because you flipped him the bird when you drove off. All right. Well, this is an actual Supreme Court case. In the, not Supreme Court case, but Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals federal case, which is one level below Supreme Court, one level above district courts, where it just so happens that Kentucky falls in the Sixth Circuit. There's an exact case like this. And so what the Federal Court of Appeals did was quote Cohen, California versus Cohen, a famous Supreme Court case, and a prior Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals case, showing that not only did that second stop unwarranted, because once you'd been ticketed, it was done. The incident was over. So since that officer pulled you over clearly because you gave him the finger, that doesn't justify the unreasonable seizure of your person when he pulls you over again. That's not enough justifiable probable cause to pull you over again. Why? Because the judge said, in America, we have a tradition of being a little bit harder on the police in regards to the burden of taking, offensive speech. If it's just speech only, we're just talking about speech. There's nothing else involved. The second time you didn't run a red light, nothing. You just took off, flipped the bird out the window at it. And so that's actually protected political speech under the Constitution. And so this Michigan lady actually sued the Michigan police officer for an unreasonable search and seizure under the Fourth Amendment, violation of our First Amendment constitutional rights to political speech. And, the officer says, well, it's not clear that speech is protected, but then the Sixth Circuit points back at another precedent, says, yes, it is. It's clear that an American has a right to basically flip you the bird without being punished for it. But we know that would provoke a lot of Americans into wanting to fight with you, right? That's what you're not supposed to do. But that's rioting. That's a different story. But the problem here, again, is that even though, just the same time as we talked about House Bill 164, even though, the police officer can't penalize you, and the law can't penalize you for expressive speech alone, that doesn't stop the police officer from making your life a bitch, right? They can still pull you over, get you into court, the whole 9 yards, right? So the effect here is for the Kentucky legislator, the political effect is for the Kentucky legislator to tell LMPD, this is my opinion, to tell LMPD, we back you against these protesters who were getting loud against you, and then trying to give them the power to determine what an insult is. But as we know from Cohen, California versus Cohen, which I told you about earlier, it's not for the government to decide what exactly is an insult. If you're not provoking someone with threatening behavior, if we want to think about those U.S. Capitol rioters, they weren't exercising free political speech, right? they were in a little deeper. And so, you can't, when back in like 1971, this guy Cohen in California went to court because he was a witness in another case, unrelated. So he was just in court to witness, but he wore this jacket, and on the back of it said, "Fuck the draft," real big. And he went into the courtroom, and the sheriff's deputies got pissed and tried to get the judge to hold him in contempt, but the judge didn't do nothing. So when he left the courtroom, they arrested him in the hallway. It went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, it's not for the government to determine what a four-letter word means. It's like a slippery slope. Once they start determining things like that, then they're going to determine a lot more. And so he said it was the justice in charge of writing the opinion at that time said, one man's vulgarity is another man's lyric when it comes, to the First Amendment. And let nobody forget that when we're talking about First Amendment protected political speech, we're only talking about against the governor. A lot of people want to say that, a private business may, that you have a right to free speech against a private business. That's not true, because everything in the Bill of Rights applies against the government except for the ban on slavery and the alcohol clause. So we're talking about LMPD getting mad because, one of us gives them the finger, calls them a pig. That's protected political speech without anything more. So it's not clear this statute's going to last a second in federal district court. But I mean, if you're up in the cop's face screaming, hey, let's get him and all that stuff, no, you can't do that.
Right.
But nothing.
That's direct threat. That's something different. But if you're just like a general, fuck the police or something like that, that's not specific threat.
And it's not fighting words either, which is another unprotected category of speech. Because fighting words means I'm gonna give you the clear impression that you need to do something to protect yourself, or or we're gonna fight. Those are like fighting words. It's like, I'm gonna kick your ass, motherfucker. You know what I mean? Like right now.
Someone just brought up a valid point in the comments.
Okay.
The verbiage is specifically law enforcement, so like it doesn't apply just to police in that case, right? Like law enforcement would be.
That's what I said earlier.
Yeah, law enforcement would be, anything. CIA, FBI, state police, sheriffs, whoever. Well, we might have lost Dave for a second, guys. Problem last time, he had some issues with his internet connection. Maybe he'll be back in just a second. But yeah, this bill is essentially going to criminalize some aspect of free speech. At least it's going to criminalize at least a little aspect of free speech. Even if it is specifically just verbiage that is directed at law enforcement. Now, one thing that really concerns me here in the bill, the bill kept language making a person guilty of disorderly conduct, Class B misdemeanor, if they accost, insult, taunt, or challenge a law enforcement officer with offense or derisive words, or by gestures, blah, 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 blah. So it almost reads as though if law enforcement aren't well trained enough to be able to, hold their tempers and retaliate because someone said something, that the person that is being physically accosted for only using verbal lingo is also going to be charged with a crime, which seems a little strange to me. Let me double check real quick, make sure Dave isn't trying to get back in here. No, not yet. All right, we'll continue while we're waiting on him. I did pull some quotes from a few people, from a Fox News source, actually. We got Kentucky State Senator David Gates. He's a Democrat. He says, I don't believe that any of my good officers are going to be provoked to a violent response because somebody does a yo mama joke or whatnot. So again, it is almost kind of putting it in that light, so that whenever law enforcement retaliates, it's also a crime against the person that they're retaliating on. So it kind of seems like a double negative on just being able to express your free speech, in my opinion. Let me double check this again real quick. All right, Dave's back. Here we go. Dave, you there? All right, he is back in. Give him a second to get his camera and stuff back up. We do have a few more minutes that we want to discuss this.
Sorry about that.
There we go.
All right, what were you saying about the comment that was about law enforcement specifically being in the statute language?
I mean, it's just it's overbearing. It's overarching to all law enforcement. It's not just police officers, right? It would be sheriffs, it'd be CIA, it'd be FBI, it would be anybody, right?
Yes. Well, it's not really going to pertain. Well, it could be, right, but it's not necessarily pertaining to like the FBI, but any state law enforcement, because it's a state law, right? It would be a state law. It's still a Senate bill, but it would be a state law.
Okay. And something that I was saying while you were kind of getting back on there was a lot of the language that I'm reading kind of puts it in the light of essentially if a protester doesn't physically accost a law enforcement officer, just, says, fuck you, and then the law enforcement officer decides to respond with physical confrontation, that not only is the protester going to...
Let's remember that you don't really need physical confrontation. The test is whether a person under your circumstances will feel that they were able to leave, like walk away from the police officer. So you don't necessarily, it doesn't necessarily have to be that.
Okay. All right. But nonetheless, in the event, if someone was to say...
is a seizure under the Fourth Amendment, right? That's what constitutes a seizure of your body. And the court test is, this is what pertains to stops, probable cause, arrest, and everything. So the test is always, from your angle, from the defendant, where they felt that it was reasonable to leave, or if they felt like that they were stopped in custody and they weren't allowed to leave. So anyway, it's a Fourth Amendment stop. So don't forget that part. Go ahead.
Yeah. Another comment we got here is someone was curious if asking their badge number would be considered challenging. So, I mean, honestly, that could create another gray area right there. It's just being like, well, I need your badge number. I want to report you. Like,
that's the problem again. Going back to California v. Cohen is like, it's not really right for the government to determine what your offensive behavior is based on their subjective belief that they were insulted or their feelings were hurt. Right?
Yeah.
I just think it's all the power of speech in the hands of the government.
Yeah. There's a couple of quotes here that I was discussing while you were gone. The first one was coming specifically from one of our state senators, David Yates. He said, "I don't believe that any of my good officers are going to be provoked to violent response because somebody does a yo mama joke or whatnot."
That's kind of a ridiculous statement, right? Because we're not hearing yo mama jokes. We're hearing fuck you, officer. And, on the other side, we're also seeing, I was on the street in the protest. I've seen this stuff. I've been legal observing and whatnot. I've seen officers, get nasty on people because, they thought they were getting offended. But it usually stems from this sense of authority that police officers are, think they're always right and it doesn't matter, but it's not true. Police have no rights underneath the Constitution. None. In fact, the only thing they do have is the burden to act reasonable. That doesn't say the people must act reasonable. It says the law enforcement and the government should act reasonable.
Right. Yeah. And see, and again, and like the way that was phrased, it was almost phrased as though people are thinking more about like physical provocation. Like basically, if a protester is to say "fuck you" and the cops attack them, they're not only going to be attacked, but they're also going to be getting criminal charges on top of it.
Well, this is what I was talking to you earlier about when I said, seizing your body. That's got to be reasonable, right?
Right.
It doesn't matter what the state law says. Constitution says that if a police officer is going to take my body, then it has to be reasonable under the circumstances. And if it's not, then that's an unjustified arrest and potentially excessive force, regardless of the First Amendment element. Because so when I was talking to you about the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals opinion earlier, that's from 2019, dude. That says that you can give a police officer the finger, and if you don't do anything more, he cannot retaliate against you on those grounds alone, and he certainly can't seize your body, because if he can't retaliate, he certainly can't seize your body. He certainly can't excessively seize your body. And I'm just speaking in the terms of the Constitution and the case law. It's like that not only is a violation of your First Amendment rights to give a police officer the finger, and the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeal has said that you clearly have that right to give a police officer the finger. If you're doing nothing more, he cannot retaliate. And if he does, then it's a violation of the Fourth Amendment, because they're unreasonably seizing you. If they got you standing there and you don't feel like you can leave, then you're seized. It doesn't matter if you're in jail or not. All right. So they've also violated that. And on top of that, they potentially violate the 14th Amendment, guarantee the due process. So it's a whole slew of problems here. So, like, if they pass this bill, it's not going to get through the federal court. And that's why I said, if they pass this bill, then I'm going to walk out on the street and I'm going to get arrested for assaulting a police officer. And we'll see how it goes down in court.
Right. And when you say that, you don't mean physically assaulting a police officer.
Yeah, give him the finger,
Right.
Or, we're talking about speech alone. And that's what it says in the statute. It said words that insult. Words that insult. That's too far. That's sweeping in too much. Sweeping in too much of the guaranteed political speech we have as Americans. You should be able to criticize the police. In fact, the Supreme Court says you can. And, they should be expected to have a tough skin. And so this statement, this whatever you were telling me earlier, that guy that made a statement, that's kind of unrealistic statement. We're not talking about mama jokes and professional police officers. We're talking about protesters yelling "fuck you" and a gang of corrupt police, the LMPD, the riot squad. And so, it's like so far removed from the reality of the situation. It's actually a dumb comment.
Right, and that's one of our senators. It's also, a Democratic senator.
Well, I'm sure he hasn't really been out on the street watching what's going on, but we all know that whenever LMPD feels like they're insulted because of their, claim to authority, hey, let's not forget that police officers aren't elected officials. They're not entitled to have or express or act out a political opinion under the color of state law. Only an elected official is allowed to do that. They're supposed to do their job and be quiet. And they're supposed to take the burden of the First Amendment in regards to people's pure political speech, and they're supposed to take the burden in the Fourth Amendment to act reasonable. In fact,
right.
Police officers don't get anything under the Constitution. And we might ask why. It's because in all reality, there wasn't any police officers at the beginning of the nation. And also, these were the king's henchmen that were coming into their homes and going through all their shit, beating them up, putting them in a jail. We're talking about the guys who wrote the Constitution. So, don't ever forget the reason the Fourth Amendment and the First Amendment are there are because of a particular struggle. We may not like everything about the founders of the Constitution, but some of the stuff they came up with and went through and put into the Constitution is legit. Like, police don't need to have endless power or social power out on the street. They should be on the defense. That's how the Constitution puts them, not the people.
Right.
They should be reasonable.
All right, we got
justify their actions. It's not reasonable for you to kick my ass and beat me up as a police officer if I hold my middle finger like this up to you. That's not reasonable. That's an unjustified arrest and excessive force and a violation of the First Amendment. Like, if I did nothing more than give you the finger as a police officer, you can't do shit about it. Nothing.
All right, we got
arrest me and make my life hell.
We only got like 2 or 3 more minutes. I got one more quote that I kind of wanted to show to some people and get your opinion on.
Okay.
This is from Attorney Corey Shapiro of ACLU of Kentucky, and basically, verbally challenging police action, even by insult or offensive language, is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the First Amendment protects people's ability to express themselves, even if it's offensive words to police. So, like twice, just saying that, First Amendment should protect this verbiage,
And enforce. Because if you arrest me over some shit I was entitled to do, you're unlawfully arresting me. So you're violating my Fourth Amendment to a reasonable seizure. And then on top of that, you're denying me due process because you're denying me the liberty to continue what I'm allowed to do, what I have the right to do. So you got a whole slew of problems when you start running into this.
Yeah. Now we got, I went ahead and I found the number that you can call to voice your opinion on the Senate bill. That is 1-800-372-7181. And that is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can call anytime to voice your opinion on any House bills, any Senate bills, anything like that. Any legislation that's being passed. If you have information and you want to express your opinion on it, to oppose or support, you can call that number at any time. But we're going to go ahead and wrap up a little. We're going to go ahead and wrap up. Is there any, final points that you got for us, Dave?
I would just say that Louisville needs to get loud right now and not let this Senate bill turn into law, because, a lot of people are going to have to get arrested to test this law. That's how the Supreme Court deals with this stuff. They have to fact-intensively investigate every case and determine whether that expressive conduct, what it is. And they don't even like to do that because they're also government actors. So everybody needs to speak up and not let this get through. We're going to have a bunch of people arrested again real soon.
Mm-hmm. All right, Dave. I appreciate you coming on to kind of break that down for us a little bit. It is nice, having a lawyer buddy that can kind of sift through some of the lingo for us.
Yeah, sometimes I forget to. When I start talking, I know people don't understand what I'm talking about. That whole seizure thing, people get confused with that. But when the Constitution's Fourth Amendment says seizure, what it means is the taking of your body.
Right. Physical accommodating, essentially.
Yeah, it also means your property, but it means your body too.
Right.
Being stopped, being arrested, being held.
Well, Dave's posted a couple of screen caps, some information on it on the Right Heart page as well. So you can go and get some more details there. We'll try to do some following up. And I'm
about to post some stuff right now, actually. So I have a bunch of links.
Actually, one more thing that I wanted to bring up. It can actually go to full vote as soon as next week, everyone. So it can be voted on as soon as next week.
That's in the Senate, though, and it still have to go back through the House. It started in the Senate. That's why it's SB.
But it can go through. It can pass the Senate and go on to the House by next week, from what I just read.
Yes, it could, but it's a little bit slower than that. They may run out of time. Possibly.
Either way, we need to light a fire under everyone's ass to go ahead and call and oppose this bill because
that bill has a lot of that other stuff in there against protesters too. I suggest reading it. Senate Bill 211. I'll post it in just a minute on Riot Heart. I got a bunch of links on my laptop here. I'm gonna post them up for everybody.
Yeah. Okay, but again, go ahead and call that number. Express your opposition to the bill because it's designed, specifically to basically try to make law enforcement a protected class, and that's not something that we necessarily want to happen. It's really just a job. So, yeah, we're going to go ahead and sign off here. So thanks again, Dave, for your time. And we'll get some more information out to you soon. So everybody stay strong and stay safe.